Thanks for coming. It makes me sound more important than I really am. First of all, as we go through this talk, it's an area of passion to me. I hope that I can do it within the time allotted, and I do think that I can do so. And all of the medals and coins that are in this particular presentation are in my collection. And I think you will appreciate the stories behind those medallic representations. So we're talking about the birth of the Netherlands, and I want to give you just a little bit of a context. The context is the Franco-Dutch War, 1672 to 1678. As you can see here, France at that particular time wanted to expand. It's Louis XIV, wanted to expand his empire. So he sent French armies up and through what we call the Spanish Netherlands. You see that there. And also one of his allies, Germany, was sending the Bishop of Munster and Cologne into the United Provinces at the top. And so they were trying to test the will and the stability of the newly found Dutch Republic. Understand that the Dutch had just finished the 80 Years' War, and they were getting together much, and if you want to think of analogy, the United States from 1776 until the Constitution, when it was a loose confederation of states, didn't have much stability, trying to get its sea legs, if you will. And while that war was going on, I just thought this was a nice picture, because while it was going on, Admiral de Ruyter, who was their magnificent warrior of the sea, was conducting fighting battles of the French and of the English fleet off of the coast. So these things are going on, and towns are being taken and things like that. Part of what was also being taken was the Groningen, and these are two representations of the siege of Groningen. And this is the crux of the birth of the Netherlands, as it is spoken to by many historians, Dutch and otherwise. This is a picture of that siege, an engraving, an early engraving, the city, the trenches, and you can see representation on one of the medals, which you will see more specifically later, representation in a medallic form. You see the city with its ramparts, and you see the trenches and the positions of the besieging armies. So Groningen, 1672. I put this map in. This is the position of where Groningen is. You know, France, the troops are coming up this way. Germans are coming this way, taking towns, Kampen and Groningen, and that's where Groningen is. I'm going to do a bit of shameless self-promotion here. This map is from my most recent book, Siege Coins of the World, 1453 to 1902, which are published through Classical Numismatic group last summer in July. And so it's a way that you can get an idea of where all the sieges that are listed in the book, which are all the sieges that are known, I synthesized from all the various sources, put it together into one document with a little bit of a history and all the sieges. So that's where that comes from. So now if you see them, you can know where those sieges are in terms of geographical location. So 1672. And this is the city, and there is the Bishop of Munster mounting his troops, and is just before the city. And that would be about, around July 17th. The preparations for that siege began around July 9. People know when the sieges are coming. It's not like an army can move from point A to point B quickly, or they can send a fleet of drones. You can't see them, and all of a sudden they show up. So things happen a little bit slower back then. The adversaries in this is Karel van Rabenhout, the Dutch commander, who very ably took care of the defense of the city of Groningen, and Bernhard von Galen, Bishop of Munster. The other pictures that I got him were make him look really bad. I wanted him at least look decent, and I said I put him on a horse as he was going to ride. The Bishop of Munster was a bishop, but he also was a military man. Understanding many of the clergy in all, whether the Protestant or the Catholic clergy back then, a lot of those offices were purchased, and those people were famous people, and then ended up being more famous because they got a position of honor. And I think the Bishop of Munster was one of those. That's a personal opinion. Don't check the history of that. It's just how I feel about him. Preparations. How do you prepare? Here's the city of Groningen. You can see it better in this map. I got a different map which shows the colorations and around the cities. It's a very typical topography of Netherlands at that time. A lot of low-lying areas have a lot of water, and this city was, most of the cities were surrounded by water, and they had canals and a whole series of things. This is an example of that. So what do you do when you know that army's coming down on you? First, the thing you do is you destroy all structures outside the city walls. You don't want them to use anything against you to hide or to use to build a siege equipment. Secondly, of course, you clear all the trees, because that's part of the structures. They take trees down, they build the trebuchets or whatever. At the time, this is later than trebuchet period, but you get the point. They're going to make things out of things that are outside that they could use against you. You open the dikes, and this is what they did. And they did this judiciously in the Netherlands at that time. There's a great piece of work, and I'm trying to remember it, the meteorological study of the inundations of the Netherlands during the Dutch Revolution by, I can't remember his name now, but if you look at the military inundations, you can find that. So they did flood areas from time to time. They opened a dike to flood portions of the surrounding land. Why do they do that? Well, they did it because it's hard to move troops, soldiers, and artillery over squishy ground. And so they would do things like that. They're in several sieges, not this one notably, but the siege of Leiden, the siege of Werden, a few others. They actually did open the dikes. And one of the problems with opening the dikes is after the 80 Years' War, about 40 to 50% of the arable land was destroyed. And although you get the enemy gets put away, you also lose your capacity to sustain yourself if you win the war. So that's why they didn't do that a lot, but they did do it from time to time. Then they took their soldiers and they went and they took all these bridges that there were access to around the kind of the moat around the city, and reinforced it, and they put their people there, and then they moved on. Now we have a siege. In the siege, it's really fantastic, really rather interesting. There's a bit of resourcefulness. The heavy mortar attacks really damaged the buildings in the center of the city quite a bit. That's how they did it. Sieges are not just this. I want to point this out now. You see them fighting. Sieges are sieges that means they surround them and they basically try to starve you out. And periodically they attack. Unless they get mad at you, then they start firing things and try to deplete your ability to defend, and so they can come and take the city. So a siege is really, you get surrounded by somebody, you get cut off, and they try to cut off your supplies, etc. If that's successful, you can be successful in a siege. So heavy mortar attacks were damaging the buildings in the center. So what they did, residents, of course, Robin Hout, he said, well, I think every building should have buckets of water to prevent them from burning down completely. Well, that's all well and good, but if everyone has buckets of water out front of the house, who is defending the city? People were all putting together to defend the city, and the Anabaptists who lived in the town, avowed pacifists. They wouldn't lift an arm to fight because they were true pacifists, and they were assigned the task of putting out the fire. So knowing that he couldn't use them to fight, those who were willing to fight fought. Those who were not willing to fight did the right thing in terms of helping defend the city. There was resolve as well. We'll talk about this a little later. That medal is a medal that was awarded to the college students. Not like some of the wars we've had recently where the college students protested. They got together, formed battalions, and they fought valiantly to protect the city. And they were rewarded with a medal to acknowledge their bravery. Reinforcements. Well, now they're fighting. You've got people putting out fires. You have people fighting. You have all the things that go on during a siege when there are attacks and counterattacks. By the end of July, the bishop, Bernhard von Galen, Bishop of Munster, demanded a surrender. He thought, I'm tired of this. This is going on too long. He misjudged the will of the Groningen people and the Dutch in general, coming in from Germany. But he was met with fierce counterattacks. William of Orange ended up sending in 50,000 reinforcements. He managed to get them through the lines in some way, shape, or form. And of those 50,000 pounds, excuse me, I said forces, pounds of black powder, he sent 14 companies of infantry, 6 companies of provisional troops, and 4 companies of Frisian from West Frisia, Frisian troops, to help defend the city. So now you had a group of people in a city, in a young republic, who still has to be tested, who have a resolve to be independent. He has this support, and now you have the rest of this coming into the town. This was very, very important. And it is certainly mentioned here. The siege ultimately was lifted on August 16th, 1672. The defenders, with all these people and all this extra stuff, they broke out in a counterattack because they weren't going to sit and wait to be starved out. Plundered, and they plundered. They took weapons, they took food, they took prisoners, and they reduced von Galen's ability to take siege to the city. And heavy rain began to fall. Sometimes I think the Dutch were blessed by God. There are several things. The word miracle, where they were being besieged, and the beggars of the seas could not come and relieve them, and a great north wind pushed the ocean. There was a storm out in the sea and pushed the waters in enough that the beggars of the sea, the pirates who were on the side of the Dutch, were able to come in and rout the people who were besieging the city. So that's several times in Dutch history. That's this type of stuff happened. August 17th, all of that restricted von Galen's troop movements, and it continued to rain. Now, when you have artillery, and there were guns, of course, they had cannon, but it uses gunpowder. And when it rains, gunpowder does not ignite. So he was really at a loss. It continued to rain, and by the morning of August 17th, the troops were gone. Bam. Excellent. What's the historical impact? Most significant test of the power of the young Dutch Republic. They were being checked. You know, Louis XIV, big power. He had England on his side for a while. He had Germany on his side. Also had Sweden on his side. And then you had the Dutch Republic fighting in allied forces like that. England eventually made peace with the Dutch. I think it was the Peace of Westminster. I mentioned it a little bit later. If any of you are from New York, that's, I guess, when New York went from Dutch to the British in about 1647 or 16, I'm not sure, 1667, I think, 1667 that happened or whatever. At any rate, England made peace. So now that the Louis XIV couldn't count on England staying out of the war because they were a major power. And that treaty meant that they wouldn't go against the Dutch. So he thought, maybe they'll go with the Dutch. No. Holy Roman Empire sided with the Dutch against the French. Louis XIV was unable to get his goal of expanding the empire. And that's where it's at. That's the end of that. That's the siege. That's the context. But the stories come with the coins. Part 2, the coins. Groningen issued a series of 4 denominations of clippies. Now understand it, siege money was made because the soldiers had to be paid. Most of them were mercenaries. So you brought coin of the realm with you, or you had coin of the realm because you were being besieged. And you paid your fighters until that money ran out. And when that money ran out, then you took other things to make money to pay them, because mercenaries don't work for nothing. So Groningen was different. Groningen still was sitting on a nice financial coffer. They were sitting on a nice money. But they decided still to make a series of coins because of that siege, using their money to pay the troops. And that's why these were struck subsequent to the siege, but technically I put them because they're really siege coins, because they were used to pay the troops. The 50 stiver, and there's a 50 stiver piece. There's a large seal on that one, a small seal, a 25 stiver, 12.5 stiver piece, and a 6 1/4 stiver. Those are the denominations. The 50, silver, of course, 34 by 34 millimeters, weight, clippy, catalog number, large coat of arms. I included the other catalog numbers because at this point on I only use, again, because it's shameless self-promotion, I only use the catalog number for my book. But that's it. And the reason is, the reason why I wrote the book is example here. You see there are at least 3 references there, and there may be more, but the 3 major references to what that coin would be there. I mean, if you look at my book, you find K241A, You can say, where did he get that? Did they pull that out of his head? No, those, you can go to those sources and you'll see that coin. And that's why I put that book together. This is a 25 stiver, 25 7 by 27, uniface clip. See, same coat of arms of the city, same things around, just a different denomination, different size. Catalog number, 12 and a half, nicer picture of that, same. And a 6 1/4 stiver. And that was the set that they set out. And they made those, and those were used to pay the troops. Now, when these were done, understand that you could tell at this point, if you paid attention to the resolve and the fighting that went on that defended the city, you know that they were very, very proud. And what the people did oftentimes to these, and I say oftentimes because you do see them, although they're not anywhere near as common as these, is they would engrave the back of them. And this is one of the ones from my collection. See what it is? Groningen besieged the 9th of July through 17th of August, 1672. And were kept as souvenirs or kept as pocket pieces. You can see the back of that. The new pieces, you'll see the haymarking from when they stamped them. But these ones, either that's because of wear, but since it's such a good condition here, I'm going to say that it's not from wear, it's that someone smoothed it so that they can engrave it that way and make a nice engraving. And that's one of the 50 stivers in my collection. Here are two other ones. Again, it's in Dutch. I probably should have translated them, but I'm not good in Dutch, so and I didn't take time to do Google Translate, so I apologize for that. But you can see this is the things, you know, Groningen's in there. It gives the dates and what goes on. 1672, besieged by the that would be on Vulcan at 9th July to August 17. And that would be the bishop, and that would be a Kampen in Munster. That's a 25 stiver engraved. Note the variety; it's always something. Each one is unique. So if you have one, and one of the things that fascinates me by having one, it's not only a unique thing to what it is, a coin, but it represents the character of the person who wrote it. It means something. It's not just a piece of metal. It's not something, and I'm going to say this, and I hope I don't hurt anyone, it's not something you just slab and look at it through plastic. It's something you have to look at. My collection is not slabbed, it's all free-range coins, so you can look at them as long as you handle them correctly. It works that way. So it's just the way I see it. And it's a type of coin that I think does not lend itself to someone saying what condition it's in. The condition it's in is it survived the damn siege. And it represents something of honor. This one is interesting, and I'll bring it up later because this was obviously engraved after December 20th because there was another siege in Coevorden that the Dutch overtook shortly afterwards. We'll talk about that later. There are medals that commemorate that too. Then there's a 12 and a half stiver. This one depicts the Bishop of Munster on his knees, probably in supplication. Now, I don't have one, but I will say that I hope to acquire one some point. On the back of some of these, the scene of the city with all the siege people, they've engraved that as well. They're really, really amazing. Of course, the artistry of the engravers is something to be admired. And 6 1/4 stivers, again, engraved. This one took me a while. I looked 20 years to find one on a 12 and a half. For whatever reason, the 12 and a halves didn't have any, many of them weren't engraved. And I finally acquired this about 4 or 5 months ago. I said, good, then I'll give a talk. Now I have the one to complete it, and I couldn't find it. So, and that is the plate coin for one of the catalogs. I found out after I purchased it. But that's the engraved pieces. Part 3, the medals, and this is the most illustrious or impressive part of it. Last vestige of the enemy left on the 31st. There's swamps. There was one road that they could go out. It took time for them to leave. They said, we're out of here. They had to pull all their equipment, and through the muck and the mire, they finally got out. Siege is over August 17. It took them to the 31st to get out. 3 churches celebrated the liberation. They had ceremonies, and it was a happy day in Groningen. And William of Orange, who was the governor of the Dutch Republic at the time, they produced 3 classes of medals. One that celebrates just the lifting of the siege, another set of medals that recognized courage of the defenders, and then a series of medals that were produced subsequent to the siege of Coevorden and the retaking. And they're related to Groningen because one side of the coin is Groningen siege and the other side has pictures of the Coevorden siege. This is the lifting of the siege. As you can see, this is going to be the theme on most of them. This is more crude, but it was done immediately after the siege, closer. The city, the siege works, and the inscription, it says, in 1672, Groningen was besieged by the bishops of Cologne and Munster on July 9 and relieved on August 17. That's 43 millimeters. Most of these are large medals, 43 to 48 to 50 some millimeters. Gorgeous pieces. I fell in love with the first one and I bought it, and that's why I started to collect the series. Here's another one. Groningen held firm to save the country, and with God's help broke the force of the enemy. 54 millimeters. Once again, you see the siege of Groningen. And the third one, now this one is one in brass. It's unlisted. I discovered that in a European auction, some obscure European auction, and bought it because I just had never seen a brass one. Most of these you see are silver. This is the only brass one. And this one here, in 1672, was heavily besieged by the bishops of Cologne and Munster on July. Cruelly treated and withdrew in a shameful way on August 17. Little editorializing, but I think they deserve to brag just a little bit after beating Louis. And again, the siege. Again, you see it, but there's a different representation of the troops and stuff that were there. Oh, try hitting the right button, sir. There you are. And then this one. This is a lot of stuff on there, and you'll have to see it. And the reason why I won't read it all is because it says, when Groningen was besieged by the bishops, yada yada, on July 9, and by the grace of God liberated on the 17th, were mayors, which would have been their council. They called them the mayors. That's how that was translated when I did it through the translate. And that's the name of all the people, all the important people in town, inscribed. You can read them. I will just stop and let you read them because I have difficulty reading Dutch names sometimes. I have difficulty reading English names sometimes. Okay? And there's another one. It's smaller, 45 grams, but 59 millimeters. And it's another one, similar to, but not identical to that. And that is the same inscription. And that was given out after the siege so that they wanted to give to those people who they wanted to recognize. Gorgeous medals, I think. Citizen and military defenders. There were 2 groups. University students on November 8th. Of course, the siege was all done in August. November 8th, the head of the college brought them all together and gave them medals. And Captain Oberst von Galen was recognized the gallantry of individuals serving under his command by issuing his own medals. This is an example of that college medal, and that's what it says, in memory of the siege and liberation presented by the states. It's the Estates General of the Dutch Republic to the members of the University for the Courage. Nice, boy, very big, heavy, thick medal. This is another one, slightly smaller, but lighter, same medal. I always kind of figured the seniors got the big medal and the underclassmen got the little medal. I don't know. Probably give some type of a pecking order to who fought and who fought the most. And this is what Captain von Galen gave out. By the order of the command of Captain von Galen, the colonel made this one for, and it's inscribed. And for years I looked for an inscribed one for sale, couldn't find one, and it was about last year there was a series that came out on an Eastern European auction site, and I was able to get that one. It was uninscribed, but it's genuine, so I added it to my collection. Again, you see what it is. You have these medals, and you see always the representation of the Siege of Groningen. But victories at both of them. These are the most impressive medals that represent the birth of the Netherlands. Number of cities have been taken, and that was Coevorden was one. And Dutch forces by Rabenhoff took advantage of the thick fog. Now this is December 20, and you understand it's probably the water is frozen, so he goes over the frozen swamp because he knows the terrain, and he takes his army to Coevorden, and he takes the city on December 20. And this is this medal that they did to commemorate them both. This side says the Siege of Groningen and Coevorden taken by force on December 20. That's a representation of the city and the walls and his men surrounding the city. It's really, really impressive medal with the detail. A large medal, 56 millimeters, just a gorgeous large medal. Another one, different representation, different positioning of the troops. That's it, Coevorden, same. Groningen, if you're not tired of seeing it now, you'll get tired of it later because there are a couple more medals that have it on it. It says, Coevorden taken by force on December 20, and again, just the words, Belagerung von Groningen, or Beleg. Belagerung is German, Beleg is Dutch. And then you have this one that commemorates the both of them. Different inscription. Verse. I'm reading around now because I was doing the things on the coin. I'll give you what's been around them. Groningen besieged by the bishops on July 9, relieved on August 17. And that one, Coevorden, taken by force from the Groningensians on December 20. Again, the different positioning of the troops. And then this one, again, slightly different positioning of the provisions and stuff like that. Again, the detail on these, just fun, just absolutely wonderful to look at. And then there's one, another smaller medal, well, 57 millimeters, smaller medal, but a different design. Groningen, smaller representation of that, but the inscriptions down here, Coevorden taken by force, and the army's in a different position around the city of Coevorden. Neat. Meanwhile, while this was going on, they were taking Groningen and Coevorden, which I think is the seed of the Dutch, of the backbone of the Dutch defense against Louis XIV. All these battles and sieges were going on. Most of these do not have siege coins. Kampen would have them. Zaltbommel had one. Woerden had a siege. Haarlem, Utrecht. Most of these all have, as you could, Deventer had one, but that was 1578, not this one. But at any rate, what you would have here is generally you'll find a lot of those sieges represented in the Dutch jetons of the period. So if you have a copy of Dugnol, you can find the Dutch jetons. And I have a group of those too that I have to go through and identify. I've been collecting those for some time. I just didn't want to put them out. English made peace with the Dutch. That's the Treaty of Westminster, 1764. At the same time, every people sided with the Dutch. And now, you have France. All France has now is Sweden. Sweden's up in the north, and they don't have much of a power at that time because of their positioning. Bam. So the war was expensive. The prospect of England engaging its troops convinced Louis, I can't do this anymore. And he had advantageous military position because he was a world power. But he was losing money, he was losing support at his court, and he was losing support from the people. And it was time to cut ties, and that's what he did. And you had the Peace of Nijmegen, Treaty of Nijmegen. This is an interesting medal. That looks gold, it's brass. Couldn't afford the gold one. On the obverse over here, it's a personification of France and the Republic shaking hands. That's a burning altar. And it's an Ouroboros. You know what that is. An Ouroboros is a snake. You always see those representations, a circle, a snake with the tail in its mouth. That's called an Ouroboros. That's a symbol for sustainability, I believe, in this case. And the coat of arms of Nijmegen. And the inscription is France and the Republic reconciled by England. So England ended up the peacemaker in this one. On this side, you see a representation, peace, seated on a globe. That's a symbol of peace. On a globe, crushing envy and war, and cherubs bringing in the coats of arms of the allies of the Dutch, and Mercury, symbolic of bringing in the peace. Very interesting. And that's the story of Groningen, and considered the birth of the Netherlands. And when I was coming to Chicago, I didn't know how to end this, and I had an idea. It came to me when I was getting ready for bed the first night here, Wednesday night. And I said, you know, when I started to collect coins, when I was 7 years old, that was 69 years ago, I collected coins. And I've evolved into collecting stories, of which the coins are representative of. And I think that has enriched me as a person, and why I wrote the book on siege coins, because of the stories that are associated with the coins are represented in it. And this is a story of the birth of the Netherlands. That's the story that I wanted to tell today. Thank you.